Welcome, Broadway fans. Today we're here for another rounding episode of Broadway Breakdown, and it is my personal favorite musical ever, so don't go away.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Broadway Breakdown.
I love this. I love this song just because of the different languages.
I feel like it's how I learned like the beginning of French and like how I know any German.
Fanda, étranger.
Oh, I know
stranger.
how. Yeah, I can say that in German. I'm totally good. In Cabaret. Hello, everybody. Meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames and Messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to Broadway Breakdown, and today we are discussing my favorite musical of all time, Cabaret. I am Phipps14, Briana Phipps, your host. Find me there on Twitter, Instagram, Phipps1214 on Snapchat. Jacque?
Welcome. And no, I'm 123 Jackie B on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, my blog, except for on Snapchat, I'm Jackie B123.
And like we've already told you a million times, we're doing Cabaret, and if you couldn't hear the music, we have our pineapple,
we have a pineapple,
we have our book, we have our playbills.
Why is this your favorite musical? I'm curious. Like, I mean, I love Cabaret, and clearly it's a very popular musical, but
part of it
that's heavy for a Broadway fan to say this is their favorite.
It is, and it's part of it. It might be a nostalgia thing for me. Mm-hmm. I grew up with this musical. My mom did when she was doing her master's for set design at San Francisco State, she did this musical, and that was like the first time I saw it, and I was like 7 or 8. My mom had this thing where I couldn't watch rated R movies or PG-13 movies, but I could watch Sweeney Todd
Cabaret.
and Cabaret when I was little. I don't know. I think that it's such a fun musical. There's so much happening, and it's lighthearted while being so intense, and it makes you leave the theater thinking, which is what I love to do. I love watching a musical and leaving the theater and just like feeling like it changed me.
I agree with you there, because I think any good theatrical experience makes you think about it after. It's very Brechtian. Mm-hmm. For those of you Bertolt Brecht fans, while we're talking about Germans. But I think that was one of the values of Brechtian theater, to say like theater should be like interactive and invasive in your life. It should be something that makes you think.
An interactive show. Like it incorporates you as an audience into the play.
Right.
And it also shows a different side of the German war. Like we learned so much about it in our history classes, like of America going over there, of all of this stuff happening. But this is like coming from a perspective of people in Germany.
I think one of my favorite things about Cabaret, especially about the performance you and I saw at the Fantasias, which is basically like based on the revival, the Broadway revival, is that it shows how Germany was this like fun and lively and really like culturally fascinating place before the war and before World War II, and then because this person rose to power and played on like the hate and the fear of so many people, it became something else entirely. And I will get into that later.
Yeah.
But
before we delve completely into it, we of course want to start our show with This Week in Theater, as we always do, and it's brought to us always by Robert Diamond and BroadwayWorld.com. So it was announced that Andrea Martin is joining the cast of NBC's Hairspray Live. She's going to be playing Penny's mom, which I love. I love her.
We're rounding out that whole cast.
I know. Like, Seaweed's pretty much the only one that they haven't stated yet.
I think so.
Like him and, I can't think of his sisters. Ruthie, his sister, basically.
I don't remember
her name either. So I think that's a great choice. You know, she's the most nominated featured actress for Tony Awards and Drama Desk Awards, which is...
It's really interesting.
And she's my favorite part in My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
I do love that movie.
So that's going to be great. I'm really excited to see that when it comes out in December.
We're recapping it here too.
We will be. We'll be on AfterBuzz TV recapping it.
Yes,
but it will be.
But
us.
you should still check it out.
It'll
be us. Not if that wasn't us. You should like just ignore AfterBuzz TV. But no.
And then Kate Schindel, Robert Petkoff, and Susan Moynes were going to be leading the Fun Home National Tour, which I'm really excited that it's going on tour.
So excited for this tour.
For those of you that don't know, it won the 2015 Best Musical. It's basically the story of a girl at 3 different stages of her life, kind of going back and discovering different things of why she turned out the way she did, and discovering...
Without giving anything away, it's her family ran a funeral home, which is why it's called Fun Home, because they called it the Fun Home, and it's based on a comic book that you can check out.
Yeah. Todrick Hall is going to be starring Kinky Boots on Broadway.
I'm so jealous that I'm not seeing this production. Todrick Hall, for those of you who don't know, is like a big YouTube sensation. Check out his YouTube videos.
Yeah, check out Beauty and the Beat is amazing. Cinderfella. Plus more, like those are my 2 favorite ones, but he's gonna be great in this. He comes from a Broadway background.
Yes, and he just got done doing his own show made by him, and so now he's
we had him in studio on AfterBuzz if you guys want to check that out too. For his, what was it? Was it just called Todrick?
I thought it was an something.
Oh, you're talking about the play thing.
I'm talking about the play.
I thought you meant the reality show he did.
Oh no, I was talking about the play that he just finished, and now I can't remember the name.
Well, he also had a reality show.
Yes,
which he came in and was on.
Check out his stuff; he's hilarious.
This one was interesting to me. Lin-Manuel Miranda and Alan Menken are going to co-write for the live production of Little Mermaid.
I'm so excited for this. I'm so excited.
I'm so intrigued as to how the music's going to turn out, because they have very different styles of writing.
Yes.
So I want to see what they come up with together.
Well, for me, like knowing that they added, knowing that they added Lin, I feel like it'll be, because they're trying to bring the Little Mermaid out of the 90s. I think it was like, can't remember what year it was.
It came out 86.
Oh, 86?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have no concept of time.
I only know that because it's my sister's year she was born, and that was like, my dad like complained over and over about us watching it so much.
I watched it as a kid, and when you're as old as I am, you start to blend time and space, and the 80s and the 90s become like one mishmash hodgepodge.
I love that you said when you're as old as I, because like the show.
I'm not as old as this show. Yes.
If
anyone's as old as I. But I feel it'll be, because it's so kind of like sugary, sweet, saccharine-y. And I love that about The Little Mermaid, but I kind of feel this will give it, by adding Lin, it'll give it an update.
I mean, Alan Menken did the original music.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's just going to kind of be there to maybe write a new song with Lin, but mainly just kind of retouch up the old ones.
Right.
And then last but not least, of course, Fevich Finkel died at 93, and he played like 3 different characters, worked his way up in Fiddler on the Roof. He started off as the innkeeper, and then he was, I think, the butcher, and then he was Tevye. He's also was in Cafe Crown, Little Shop of Horrors, and Finkel's Follies. So it's a great loss to the theater community, but he had a great long run, and
I don't know what else to say except for rest in peace.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you again to Robert Diamond and BroadwayWorld.com for giving us our news every week. Sorry. And I encourage everyone, go check out the full length of these stories. That gives much more in depth. There's a trailer for Todrick being on Kinky Boots, and there's also Andrea Martin doing a little shout out to letting everyone know she's in NBC's Hairspray Live. So definitely check out the full articles and more on BroadwayWorld.com. All right, let's get into this. I wanted to talk a little bit about where this musical came from. It was originally...
I just have to tell you in my notes. So, I dashed down notes before we come in here, and I wrote next to 1966, which was the year that Cabaret first came out. I wrote Joel Grey and parentheses OG. It tickled me.
Original girl?
No, because he's the original.
No,
he's
I know.
The original MC. Original
I say
girl.
OG because Teen Mom has OG now, and it's the original girls. And it kind of makes sense for the MC to be original girl in my mind.
Yeah.
So this was based on there were 2 short stories called the Berlin Stories, was what they were called in America. The second story, which is I think Goodbye Berlin, was the main one that like features it, and it mainly features Sally Bowles.
Yeah, Goodbye to Berlin.
Goodbye to Berlin.
It's a fictionalized, like an autobiographical but fictionalized.
Yeah, it's his
story of Christopher Isherwood's time in Berlin.
And his full name is Christopher William Bradshaw Isherwood, which is where they came up with Bradshaw for Cliff, which I thought was really cool to give that nod to him. But yeah, it's his time in Berlin and his, like you said, fictionalized accounts of it. So none of it's 100% true.
Sally Bowles is not an actual like person, but it's based on people he knew in the cabaret scene.
Yeah, he got the last name, I believe. He later said he got the last name from this guy Paul Bowl that he met. So it's he just took bits and pieces. So like no way is this like 100%. He didn't meet someone named Sally Bowles in a cabaret. They didn't. None of this like fully actually happened, but some of it may have. I just can't be sure what. And then that got turned into a play called I Am a Camera, which got turned into a movie. And I watched the short film. It's not short film. It's an hour and a half. But for that time period, that was normal. Which is a ridiculous film. But Sally is like the main part of it. So she's really the main thing that came out of both of these. Because she's the same character in 100% way. Like Fräulein Schneider, which is what Sneider is in these adaptations, is like not the same at all. Like in the book, she's completely okay with Fräulein Kost's lifestyle and she thinks it's funny and she actually really likes her, and I'm like, that's different.
Obviously they have to make changes when you do a play, but I think the cabaret scene as far as material for artwork is very rich. If you guys ever want to see movies too about the cabaret scene, I recommend Marlene Dietrich's movies. I mean, I did a play a long time ago in college where I had to play a cabaret singer, and I can't sing, but I don't think all of them could either.
Well, it's funny that you're mentioning that. I'm going to mention it later about the singing, because they actually didn't want super well.
Yeah, it was supposed to be. People. I mean, Sally Bowles was supposed to be a character who was like a struggling artist. If she could sing really well, she wouldn't be doing like the cabaret scene.
Yeah, that's basically what they wanted to say, is like she wouldn't be in this dingy place if she was an amazing singer.
Right.
Or an amazing actress or any of it.
Right.
So that's where this play was inspired from, and it was then later made into Cabaret in 1966, like Jacque said, starring Joel Grey. We're going to talk about kind of the original versus the revival in a way, not to say like one is better than the other, just to kind of give what the differences are in the two different shows, because this is one show that when it was revived did change a lot, like not storyline wise but feel. And so the original was 1966, and I'm going to focus mainly on the revival of 1998 because 2014 and 1987 is basically the same. There's little differences, but overall they didn't change that much. So we're going to focus mainly on those two. Okay, so...
The movie came, just for your reference, the movie came in 1972. 72. And the movie I see is kind of like a bridge between those gaps, because they took songs from the movie that they used in the 1998 revival. And... but the movie has Joel Grey, and I think, to me, the way that Sally Bowles is portrayed after that, like, you can see people still sometimes trying to do a Liza thing. But Joel Grey is, like, the way Joel Grey plays it is very different from the way Alan Cumming plays it.
Yeah, and that's the first person I have on my list is the MC, which is Joel Grey and Alan Cumming, as Jacque just said. And part of it is the time period. Part of it is that you couldn't do what Alan Cummings does with the part back then.
No,
it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have been a hit. People wouldn't go see it. That would have been too much,
right,
for them to.
It's funny because we did a test show of Gypsy in which we had the same kind of discussion, because Gypsy came out in, I think, the late 50s or early 60s, and we had the same thing where it's like there was even though like the show has taboo material, both Gypsy and Cabaret, there are certain things at certain times that you can show, and then once those boundaries have been pushed back, which they have by the 90s, it's like now you can have nipple clamps or whatever you want to have.
Yeah, like, I mean, this is a time period when on TV you couldn't even show someone sleeping in the same bed as each other. So for what Cabaret did in 1966 was very risque. I mean, and this was right before Hair came out, which kind of even further tested the boundaries by doing nudity and all this. So it was very risky for that time period. So if you watch it now, it doesn't seem that way by our standards. But for that time period, what they were doing was pretty risky. And kind of like, it may not have worked. people still might have been like, I don't like this, it's too much. So Joel Grey plays it more like he wears a suit, he has rosy cheeks, slicked back hair, he's described as asexual, which he does have sexual things, like there is like little sex stuff happening, but you don't view him as a person that's going to go be doing these things outside of the club. Whereas Alan Cumming, you have in your head that he's pretty much doing all of this like raunchy stuff when he's not at work.
I feel like, though, it's a natural progression from Joel Grey to Alan Cumming, because first off, they look very similar, and then second, it's like by the time you get to Alan Cumming, it feels like it's like Joel Grey has like had too much to drink and like stripped off his clothes, and then that's when you get the 1998 revival.
It was interesting because Alan Cumming put track marks on his body because he said he felt that the MC was a junkie. Addict junkie.
Yeah. He has bruises and stuff when you watch the videos, and you're like, whoa, okay.
And then we have Sally Bowles, who was originally played by Jill Hayworth and is now, was then Natasha Richardson. Both played it very well, I thought. Like, singing-wise, Jill Hayworth had a little bit more of that sound. I don't know, like that kind of cabaret-y sound, like Natasha Richardson played it more like I said, it's darker in the new one, so she played it a little more junky, a little more tattered and beat up, and I think Jill Hayworth was trying to still be a little more sing-songy pretty.
Jill Hayworth, I don't know. It's like her voice to me isn't as appealing as Natasha Richardson's, so it's hard for. That's my take. That's my comparison. Is like her voice. I just don't find it as appealing as Natasha Richardson's. It's kind of irritating to me, but I understand that's like what they were going for. Mm-hmm. And then Natasha Richardson's voice is like a little bit stagey, but very like appealing stagey.
And then Cliff, we have Bert Convy and then John Benjamin Hickey. And I read, and I actually was a little confused by it because originally he's portrayed as straight, and then the movie he was bisexual, and then when they bring it back, they're saying he's pretty much homosexual. But I still view him as bisexual.
I view him as bisexual.
In the newer renditions as well. Like, maybe he's a little more geared towards men, but, I mean, he's still sleeping with Sally Bowles, so.
And the version that we saw, I felt like it was clearly bisexual.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought. So I was a little thrown off when I read that Sam Mendes had said that. I was like, huh, I didn't quite get that.
Maybe Sam Mendes doesn't know the definition of bisexuality. But
Herr Schultz was Jack Lifford in the original and is Ron Rifkin in the new one. It was funny when Steve, my boyfriend, was listening to it. He just commented about how much more Jewish Jack Lifford sounded. He had that very stereotypical Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
But I think both played it great. Most of these parts, like, I like both people.
I feel the same way. Well, except for the original. Except for the original Sally, but for the most part, I feel like this is the kind of show though where it reminds me of Chicago in a way where you can almost have all kinds of like iconic people playing all kinds of roles, and it just doesn't matter who it is. Mm-hmm. Whereas like I can see where with a show like Hamilton, where people are always going to be thinking of the original cast when they're seeing other things. And I don't know why that for Cabaret in Chicago, it feels different.
I think this one you still are in a way, but it's more about not so much listening to the songs and feeling that. It's more about if you see them portraying these people, it's like, wow, they understood this character really well. Because it is more about an acting standpoint in this than singing. So the way they portray the character and how comfortable they are on stage, because like I've watched clips of like certain actors playing it, Michael C. Hall, and he just didn't seem as comfortable, and it showed very much so.
Yeah.
And so even though the singing wasn't bad, it was like I don't get the character from you as I got it from Alan Cumming.
Right.
And then in the original...
The version we saw, by the way, had Randy Harrison, who was on Queer as Folk, playing...
He was amazing.
He was friggin' phenomenal. Not only was I freaking out because I was a huge Queer as Folk fan from back in the day, but then I was like, you always think when Joel Grey and Alan Cumming are so much associated with those roles. It's interesting because as the MC, when you hear it as the MC, you're like, oh, this is kind of the narrator, and you don't realize it until you see it, that you're like, the MC is the through line. The MC is like the main...
He's observing everything, and he's judging you through all of it. Not like the people on stage, but I felt as an audience member that as the play went on, he was judging you more and more as an audience member, because I felt that they were trying to do it in a way that was to say, you're a bystander of all of that's happening right now, and you're sitting there doing nothing. And
I
so
can see that.
as it went on, and he would start like sneering at the audience and saying things in a certain way, I'm like, you're judging us and getting really upset with us for not doing anything about what's happening.
And I realized just earlier, I said that, like, I was saying that, like, there was no, like, iconic people associated with the roles. I'm excluding the MC, because the MC, to me...
The MC is the best role in this.
Is the best role in this.
If there was one role I could ever play, and it's not a woman role at the moment, and it's never been a woman role, I would want to be the MC.
Yeah, the MC is clear, like, to me,
the
MC is the best role. It's the most iconic role. They associate it, you know, when you have these people that are associated with this particular role, I feel like almost any other, like, big name actor could play almost any of the roles, but the MC is very particular, and just like you said, you have to be very comfortable. So when I came to watch the version at the Pantages, I was a little worried, because I'm like, how are you going to stand up to Alan Cumming? How are you going to stand up to Joel Grey? And man, like, Randy Harrison knocked it out of the park. It was just like, you were captivated by anything and everything he did. And he has a great voice.
And there's so much ad-libbing with the MC. Like, even if you're reading through the script, which this book in here has the script, every other line for the MC is like, and then ad-lib something, and then ad-lib something. So you have to be very quick on your feet to play that role. I love that role. I wish I could play that role. And then last but not least, we have Fräulein Schneider, who is Lena, and Mary Louise Wilson. Both good. Like, she's like my least favorite, like, not least favorite, that's mean to say. I just get mad at her during the play.
I actually love the Fräulein Schneider role.
I do too. I just get mad at her because I want her to make a different decision than what she made.
The thing is, like, the musical is sad. You know she's going to make that decision.
Yeah.
Because it's like Germany makes that decision. The cabaret world that you see is like a small version of what's happening on in Greater Germany at the time. So you're watching it, and you know all the fun's going to come to an end, and you know Fräulein Schneider's going to make the wrong decision, and you know these people are going to die, and you're still watching it.
And you're still... The first act does such a great job of making you forget that that's going to happen until about the very last part of it, when they start bringing in the song of "Oh Fatherland, Fatherland."
Yeah. To me, it's interesting, because we always talk about our diva songs. So, like, what song, like, would you sing out in your car? Or for me, sometimes it's the song that would resonate with me the most. And historically, listening to the album, I always listen to the 1998 revival is the first Cabaret CD or album or whatever that I had. That moment is a real turning point, and you can tell in the musical, you can tell on the album, this country that thought of itself as so great, and they were having a great time, and they were in this very artistic period. It's like, that is the exact moment where everything starts to get really morose and turn around and go very, very wrong.
Yeah. And that even shows in the music. Like, the original music was a lot more campy. Like, they brought in songs to make it darker. They changed songs around. We have Money was in the original, was like, I have all the money I need. And then it's money, money, money.
Yeah, yeah.
Money, money, money. Like, it's, which is better for what the play is trying to get across. But it also could be, like, in that time period, they felt they couldn't really go that dark. They were already dealing with a dark subject. I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, in the 60s, you had people that were still alive. Not that people aren't alive anymore that were alive during World War II, but you were a lot closer to that time period. So you're talking only 20-something years separated from it. And, like, when you watch a show like, let's say, Mad Men, where you have some of the characters still feeling like certain resentment or certain feelings that are left over from World War II, that is, even though like we might think of 20 years as distant, it was still very, very raw to these people. So you had to be very careful about how you portrayed certain things.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about the changes they made with music, and mainly focusing on what was excluded in the revival versus what was added. So they took out the telephone song, which I was happy about because I don't like that song. And I thought the little part where she says it while he's picking up his typewriter and you're sort of hearing the cabaret, that's enough of the telephone song. I don't need any more of it. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, it was really a filler song. I felt like we're just literally putting a song in here.
They have Don't Go, which I like. I think it's the What Should I Wake Up, which I like that song. It's not needed, but I do like the song.
For me, my opinion is always going to be I prefer the songs from the revival, just because that's what I not necessarily grew up with. I was in high school by the time I listened to Cabaret, so
it's what you knew first, though.
It's what I knew first. And then I went back and I watched the movie later in college, so it was kind of like a reverse viewing. And then I started to get to know the original, and so it's still this thing to me where it seems weird because I started watching it backwards.
And then they got rid of Mieskite, because in the version you see now, Fräulein Kost is the one that tells Ludwig that he's Jewish, that Herr Schultz is Jewish, and she makes like a joke like, oh, like not like he can't afford this, they have all the money, the Jews. And that's the moment he like realizes that he's Jewish and then wants to leave the party. In the original play, Herr Schultz is trying to kind of bring everybody together and get the party lively up, so he's like, I'm going to tell a story, and it's a song called Mieskite, which is a Jewish word meaning ugly. And that's when Ludwig discovers that he's Jewish. So again, I think they cut it because they wanted to add in other songs, and due to timing and stuff, and no one knows that word really anymore. I think back then people may have been more like, I wouldn't have known what Mieskite was if I hadn't listened to this.
Even not knowing what it means, it just seems weird in the sense that they like Herr Schultz knows what's going on. So to have him like implicate himself in a room that might have Nazis in it, it seems like very, very irresponsible.
Yeah, and they try to play it off like, oh, he's drunk. But
I mean, and yeah, he's drunk in the revival too, but it's like he's not dumb drunk, he's just
I think it's
he's
song
just drunk.
That was very much, they didn't need to have it in there. Cutting it, they could have kept it in, and it would have just changed the feel a little bit, because you're already starting to get dark by that point, because Bradshaw's like realizing that Ludwig's a Nazi, and there's all this like drama happening at the party, and then let's bring this like lighthearted song in, and then let's go back to it being dark. So I thought it wasn't completely needed, so I wasn't minding it not being in.
But I think that song also does the same. It gives you the same feeling that the reprise of Tomorrow Belongs to Me gives you, because you have this room full of people singing this song about their country, and the song itself, like the words are very prideful about Germany, but it's like what's going on is very very terrible. So it gives you that same feeling of that disconnect where you're like what a beautiful song, and like how much these people love their country, but how much they love their country is also what is like making their country really terrible right now.
So like it wasn't needed. It didn't. We have already said it. Then they added in Mein Herr, which I love. I grew up watching the movie originally. I can't remember if I watched it before my mom's performance or after, but that song's in there, and I love that song, and I think it is amazing, and I'm glad they put it in. And then we have Maybe This Time, which also is an amazing song, was added in, which I think works better for the feeling than Don't Go did.
I will tell you, like when we saw Andrea Goss, who has a very, very beautiful voice, unlike a lot of, you can tell that she's a very well-trained singer, unlike someone like not that I'm dissing Michelle Williams or Emma Stone, but these are not traditional singers.
Mm-hmm.
So to have someone play the Sally Bowles role but actually have a really great voice, it was a wonderful experience. Like when she sings, by the time she's singing Maybe This Time, you could hear a pin drop in that theater.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was like one of the most like moving moments in theater I've ever had.
And then they added another one of my favorite songs, which is I Don't Care Much. And I love the MC singing this song because it gives you a completely different look at him. Because he's always like making lightheartedness of all of these situations, being like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'm going to tell you what's happening, but I'm also going to make you laugh. And this time I'm just...
Well, it's that's the moment where he starts to, because, you know, he's been keeping up the momentum the whole time. And that's the moment where he starts to realize everything's gone to shit.
He starts losing hope in anything.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing moment. And they also changed it. The intro, they have them actually introducing the Cabaret girls by name, and the boys and Sally Bowles, which doesn't happen in the original. They just say the Cabaret girls, and there's no boys, and there's no Sally Bowles.
There's no Fritzy and Lulu.
Which is one of the like highlights of that intro song, because there's so much ad-libbing going on. He can have so much fun with it.
It's such a blast. It's such a blast.
And then they changed also the young boy on the gramophone that we hear nowadays used to be a men's chorus, which I think both give you the same effect in a different way. One is a little boy singing very beautifully in a very quiet room because it's on a gramophone, and then one is just like all these people coming together and singing, and both are eerie, both are powerful. So I think either one works. And then we already talked about the money one. So let's go into our Diva song. What's your Diva song from this one, Jacque?
You know what's funny is I would have said, so I gave the argument for why Tomorrow Belongs to Me I feel is so significant, but I do love the Pineapple song. There's something like so cute and wonderful about the Pineapple song. But after watching the most recent version that we saw at the Pantasias, I think it's Maybe This Time now. Mine
is Willkommen. I love that song. I love doing all the different languages. I love having fun with the little chorus parts. I sing it out loud in my car. I sing it at home. I sing it on the show.
It's a blast. It's hard to resist singing that.
Yeah, it's such a fun song, and I love that one.
But it's interesting how in the 1998 Broadway revival, you know, for those of you who have not seen it or are not familiar with it, you're watching the first act and you're having a blast. You feel like you're at a cabaret, you're part of the show. And then after the intermission, you come back and you're like, what the actual F just happened? I am in a different place, because everything is very, very, very dark, very somber. And then at the end, you have the MC in the concentration camp outfit with a pink star.
Well, we're gonna get to the ending. I don't want to get too much into it.
Sorry. Okay.
I don't want to get too much ahead because I'm gonna talk about the differences in the endings. But I do want to talk about the costuming a little bit, and I have a couple pictures from the original cast costume, and I have a picture from the new one, and it's very different. Like we said, like they couldn't wear. This is the original. They're wearing kind of like these, like they're wearing skimpily clad, but they're like kind of
burlesque-esque.
Yeah.
Burlesque-ish.
And he's in a suit. And then when you go to the revival picture, this is Alan Cumming and the Girls Now, which is just very bare minimum. Them wearing just undergarments, ripped stockings. He's in that little get-up with the parachute suspenders. So very different.
I think I actually really love the revival outfits, but I think it's also because you have to update it for a modern audience, because for what the outfits were, the outfits that you thought might be risque in like the 1960s are not the same outfits that are going to be risque to a modern audience. So you almost have to update those outfits so that like people coming in get a feeling of, I'm seeing something I'm not supposed to be seeing.
I think the main shock value for everybody wasn't even so much the girls or anything of that, because they just were still wearing lingerie, just more of what would really be underneath their clothes back then than what they wore to make it more scant. But I think the MC is really what was the shocker for everybody, because why would he be wearing that? Like, that's
he's
not
legitimately in his underwear.
Yeah, and like that is the one thing that you would not have seen in a cabaret at all back then.
Yeah, it's very fetishistic, which is interesting because when you look at Germany in like the 80s and the 90s and today, Germany became in the like 80s and 90s very like they had fetish clubs and fetishistic like outfits and things like that. So it's almost like a reflection of a more contemporary German fetishism kind of outfit.
But I mean, I still love that costume, but that was the one that I was like, that one they were just doing for shock value alone. Okay, so let's go into the ending, and like you were saying, this new one, if you want to finish that.
He's wearing the concentration camp outfit, and then he's got a Star of David and the pink triangle. The Star of David meaning that his character would have been Jewish, and then the pink triangle meaning that he was gay or bisexual or homosexual. Yeah. And he is electrocuted, or
that's what I got.
Yeah, that's what I got from it. He's electrocuted.
And this one is different too, because when usually at the original, he says, even the orchestra is beautiful. And in the original, they slid the orchestra out onto the stage with them, which you'll see in the Tony Award video we have later on. But they slide them back out, and they're not as pretty. They're playing not as pretty, and they are wearing Nazi uniforms. And then he just goes and does his, there's a big montage of, everybody in a cluster, and, Herr Schultz coming out and saying a line from, I'm a German, and Schneider, and all of them just saying, kind of lines, and then it all goes dark, and the MC's left alone, and he goes, Auf Wiedersehen, I'll be on tour, and then walks off stage. Which, actually, my parents saw it in the 80s, and my dad said he saw Joel Grey, and he said that Joel Grey did the Auf Wiedersehen, walked to the next spotlight, I'll be on tour, next spotlight, and then just looked at them all and said good night, really grossly, and walked off.
And this version's
much different.
He's electrocuted, and you get the feeling that everybody who is around him, who is draped on the stage, all the characters, you get the feeling that they're actually dead.
Yeah, they all went to the concentration camp.
That's what you get the feeling of. And it's interesting to me because when you're looking, history has a way of repeating itself, and history has a way of being important, and history is a good teaching tool. So when you're looking at something like this, when I was watching it, I got physically ill. I was like, this is to me, and I know I'm probably going to get some comments, when you think of how sometimes Americans think of themselves as the greatest country on earth and the most invincible people on the face of the planet, and some of the ugly things people are saying about certain people in our society right now, you can easily compare it to some things that happened in Nazi Germany. And so to see this production and know it was coming off of a 1998 revival, but still being so very topical today, it was so chilling for me to see, because you have this Germany was such a fun country at the time, but they had also been burned in the First World War, so they were very vulnerable at the time. They were vulnerable to Hitler and this dictator, and then who played on the anti-Semitism and the fear of people in a country. And you can have rulers, and Germany was democratic at the time, and they voted this guy in, and then he became a dictator. So you can see in society today where a country that thinks it's great and is having a great time and is living in excess, where they can come down very quickly with one wrong turn.
Well, and you can see, I think that's why stuff like this is so important to watch, because you could see how something like this, even though you think in your head this could never happen, how could this ever have happened? It could never happen again. It could happen again, and you can kind of see how that happens when you are when you're a country looking for something to get you out of such a bad time. It's terrible, and it can happen. And if the more we think it can't happen, that's when it could happen.
Yeah, and the message to me from watching this version was the party stops, and if you don't pay attention, the party stops in a very ugly way.
Yeah. I do want to get to the Tony Awards really fast, because we are getting towards the end here. So I'm going to play the original Tony Awards production.
Someone said, I believe he was executed by the fence trying to escape. I could see that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. And also, I want to quickly say, as we're pulling this video up, to the London production in 2012 took it a step further, and their ending was that everyone got undressed and walked to the back of the stage, and then Ludwig comes through and knocks the cabaret letters down as he walks by, and then white snow looking like stuff starts falling, and you hear hiss of gas, and they're all standing naked in a huddle in the back of the thing, so they're in the showers. Okay. Sorry, I had to,
very dark.
I had to say that one because I thought it was a really
ending.
cool way to do it. So this is going to be the Joel Grey version at 1967 Tony Awards for their production. And kind of just get a. This will give you a flavor of the difference of him and now coming. I love their outfits because they have cats on there.
Yes.
You don't believe me? Well, do not take my word for it. Go ahead, ask her.
He's just such a caricature.
These outfits are so
Outside,
burlesque.
it is winter, but
They won
here
Best
it's so
Costume.
hot. Every night we have the battle to keep the girls from taking off all their clothing. So don't go away. Who knows? Tonight we may lose the battle.
She has a cat tail coming down from her crotch.
They all do. Like all the ones from that
Oh
costume.
my gosh. It's hilarious.
So that's a little taste of that one. This was nominated for Best Musical, Best Original Score, won both of those. Jack Lifford was nominated for Best Leading Actor. Loette Lenya was Best Performance for Leading Actress. Joel Grey and Edward Winter were nominated for Best Featured Actor, and Joel Grey won, which I thought was interesting because in the revival, the MC is listed as leading, and in this one, he was a featured. It won Best Performance by Featured Actress for Peg Murray. It won Best Direction. It won Best Choreography. It won Best Scenic Design. It won Best Costume Design. It won a lot. And then you go to 1987, and it was nominated for Best Revival, Best Performer for Featured Actor for Werner Klemperer, Best Performance for Featured Actress for Alison Reed and Regina Rensick, and won none. And then we go back to 1998, which this is almost unheard of, I feel, where it was nominated for pretty much as much as the original. So this is Alan Cumming with in the Tony Awards. So you can already tell the difference in the character.
What's interesting to me is his outfit's almost close to a German soldier outfit.
Well, and they use it later on.
Yeah. Because he's got the soldier
The leather coat.
leather trench coat, and then he's got the the stirrups that hold up your socks and the boots.
Yeah. It was I was talking to Jackie earlier about this because in the book I have over here, it has his diaries from the pre-shows. And I just had like a fangirl moment because he started talking about like how Spice World was coming out because he was in that movie and he was in New York and the Spice Girls came and they went out and they saw his show and I was like, I love that so much. Oh yes, and there's the little
Alan Cumming fangirling. Well, we would fangirl over Alan Cumming.
yeah.
But in here it's so hot. Ooh.
Ah.
Every night we have to battle with the girls to keep them from taking off all of their clothing. So don't go away. Who knows?
Tonight we may lose the battle.
I like their makeup too. I like
Yeah.
that they all look like kind of like trashy
Yeah,
junkies.
because you want them to look trash. That was the one thing. That was like that's why I like this one better is because I saw a production where they were all wearing glitzy outfits, and I was like, that's not what a cabaret is. Like a cabaret, you wouldn't.
It was a seedy underbelly.
Yeah, you
It
would
was
go
the
to a
seedy
nice
underbelly.
place to see something like that. You wouldn't if you went to a cabaret. You're getting like the lowest of the low.
And notice when I'm comparing it to burlesque, like not that burlesque didn't have its like
It's just a little more glamorous.
dirty aspect to it. It's definitely more glamorous than a cabaret because
Yeah,
the cabaret was kind of like a more.
it's where you could go get a cheap drink and get a cheap lay.
Yeah.
And so this one was nominated / won for Best Revival of Musical. Alan Cumming won for Best Leading Actor, which is what I said was different. Natasha Richardson won for Best Leading Actress. Ron Rifkin won for Best Featured Actor for Herr Schultz. Mary Louise Wilson was nominated for her Fräulein Schneider. Best Direction, Best Choreography, Best Costume, Best Orchestration, and Best Line Design were all nominated as well. So it didn't win as much, but it was nominated for a lot. And
I think the Fräulein Schneider and Herr Schultz relationship to me doesn't get enough, like, I don't know, like press coverage, I want to say, or enough people like looking into it, because it's definitely one of the like stronger and more poignant stories in the whole thing. Because I mean, Sally is kind of just a terrible person from the beginning, and here you have two people that are sincerely in love, and then one of them makes a bad decision based on fear, which is so sad to me, because that's why I love the Pineapple Song. It's such like a sweet romance. It's always so
interesting to think, because like she has that whole speech of like, it's easy for you to say you are young, and I'm like, so wouldn't it be easier if you're older to, like, even if you knew something bad was going to happen, because you're towards the end of your life, but it's like still that fear exists. So 2014 production was nominated for also Best Featured Actor and Actress for Danny Bernstein and Linda Amond, and didn't win anything. So, like I said, the two other revivals are pretty much just the regular ones with little tiny changes.
But in 1968, Dame Judi Dench played Sally Bowles in the West End, and I'm still mad that I never saw that, because I would have, not that I was alive in 1968, not that I was born by then.
It'd be really fun to see Dame Judi Dench come back and play Fräulein Schneider now.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
That would be fun to watch.
I'd like to see that.
Okay, so now that we're at our ending, which do you prefer? I think we already know, but the original versus revival.
I prefer the revival. I think that's just because I grew up listening to it, and because I like the darker aspect, because of what you said earlier, where you said, I like this play because it makes me think about something. When it gets very dark and very ugly like that towards the end, after you've been having a great time in the first act, it makes you think. It really does make you think.
And I prefer the revival as well, even growing up with more of a Joel Grey MC. I just think that the darkness and the seediness of the newer one works and portrays better what the message is than the older version did. And I think that's just because the older version could not have done that back then.
Right. And I don't doubt it was risque for its time, but it's like sometimes to get the message across, you have to make an update. They do it with Shakespeare
especially
all the time.
The further away you get. Like when you're closer to something that just happened, it's easier for people to know not to do certain things,
right,
or that those things could happen. When the further away you get from them happening, the more it's, oh, that could just never happen anymore. Oh, that couldn't happen nowadays. But
well, I hope people don't think that. I hope people don't come away from Cabaret thinking that.
Well, no, I don't think coming away from Cabaret you could, but I think people nowadays, it's easier for them to think that that's
we're more
kind of
removed from
happen.
Actually World War II.
Yeah.
So there's no harm in like referencing it as a historical like portent than people who are actually coming from that time period and still have those raw emotions.
Exactly. So that was our show for Cabaret, the theater production. Next week, Jacque will be gone, but I will be here with another person. We'll be discussing the film that starred Joel Grey and Liza Minnelli. Always, you can find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. Submit.
Comment, tweet at us. I will, if you comment, if you give us a shout out on iTunes, I will read it on air. Tweet at us. Let us know if there's any musical that you're really passionate about. Let us know, and maybe we'll feature it.
Yeah, and also we have our Facebook page, Broadway Breakdown. We have our Twitter at Broadway Bdown. Follow us there as well, and please follow us on our normal Twitters, which is BPhips14.
And 123 Jackie B. And we'll have a whole slew of updates for you there for what shows we already know we're covering, and I think you guys will be really interested. Yeah.
So join us back here again next week for the film, and we'll give Jacque a little love too, even though she's not here. Bye, guys.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network,
We would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.